Have you ever found yourself wondering if your current financial situation is truly what you deserve? Have you ever felt that tightness in your chest when you think you might be wasting your true potential? Well, James Williams felt the same when an ordinary man, stuck in a job he hated, suffocating with bills, and the feeling that nothing would change. But something extraordinary happened when he discovered a new way of seeing life. Through the law of attraction, James learned to use the power of his mind to rewrite his destiny. From an unmotivated employee, he became the owner of his own business, experiencing prosperity that previously seemed impossible. And here's the most surprising detail: this transformation didn't come from outside, but from within. It began with simple practices like gratitude, visualization, and positive affirmations. Small things, but when repeated daily, they opened doors to a completely new future. Now tell me, have you ever considered that you might be one step away from experiencing this same turning point? If this story has piqued your curiosity, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, like it, and comment below. This way you'll not only strengthen this community, but also stay connected to content that can transform your life. Because after all, James's journey isn't just his, it could be yours too. James Williams was an ordinary man, the kind you could pass on the street without imagining what was going on inside him. He worked every day in a grueling routine, carrying on his shoulders the weight of a life that seemed never to change. His alarm clock rang early, but enthusiasm didn't accompany the shrill sound. And so time passed, as if he were trapped in an endless cycle. In the office where he spent hours, James felt suffocated. There was no sparkle in his eyes, just the feeling that he was living to pay bills and survive. It was as if the air in the place was slowly draining his energy, leaving only a silent void. The days seemed the same, and even the clock seemed to tick slower when he was there. Deep down, James knew he wasn't where he wanted to be. He had dreams, desires, even ideas that sometimes emerged as tiny sparks of hope. But real life always seemed to have a way of snuffing them out. His salary barely covered his expenses, and the idea of achieving something bigger seemed nearly impossible. Still, something inside him insisted on refusing to shut up. There were nights when James lay in bed and wondered, was I just born for this? These questions followed him like a shadow, reminding him that something was missing. He stared at the ceiling, as if there he might find answers, but all he saw was silence and darkness. Deep down, he felt as if he were living a life that wasn't his. And it was in this state of apathy and demotivation that James began to notice small signs around him. Something was whispering inside him, urging change, almost like a call he couldn't ignore. It was as if life was nudging him, reminding him that there was still a different path waiting to be discovered. Every morning for James started the same: the sound of his alarm clock, his body heavy, and the desire to stay in bed for 5 more minutes. Traffic seemed like a maze with no exit, swallowing up his hours before the day had even truly begun. He felt like every honk of his horn was a reminder that he was trapped in a life that brought him no joy. It was a colorless cycle, where even coffee lost its flavor. Arriving at work, the feeling was the same as always: a gray room, stacked papers, and a computer screen that never seemed to rest. James did what he had to do, but without enthusiasm, without passion, simply out of obligation. The clock hanging on the wall became his greatest enemy, slowly ticking away the hours until the end of the workday. Lunch was nothing more than a quick, almost mechanical break. He ate without tasting it, distracted, mentally counting down the time until he could leave. He often looked out the window and saw people walking freely on the street, and wondered why he couldn't be outside, experiencing another reality. The afternoons dragged on even more. Each task seemed heavier than the last, as if the work was sapping his vital energy. He looked around and saw faces similar to his own, tired, discouraged, surviving more than living. This routine suffocated him, and each day seemed like just another repetition of the last. When work finally ended, James felt no relief. only exhaustion. The drive home was silent, accompanied by thoughts of frustration. He'd arrive, drop his briefcase in a corner, and flop down on the couch, already knowing that the next day would all start again. And deep down, something inside him screamed that he didn't want to live like this forever. Over time, James's dissatisfaction was no longer something discreet. It was almost like an open wound he carried every day. He felt he was wasting his talents, as if he had been born for something greater, but was living below his true self. This feeling gnawed at him silently, as he tried to smile to hide his frustration. Deep down, he knew he wasn't living, just surviving. His salary covered the bills, but there was nothing left for dreams, travel, or even small personal achievement. It was like walking in a desert, where the water of fulfillment never reached. He looked around and saw himself stuck in a routine that didn't reflect his true potential. Conversations with co-workers often reinforced this emptiness. Some resigned themselves, others complained, but few believed there was a way out. James, however, couldn't be content. His heart ached for change, even as his mind tried to convince him it was normal. But normal didn't mean happy. Sometimes he daydreamed. He imagined himself master of his own time, building something of his own, feeling proud of what he accomplished. However, reality alone was enough for this dream to crumble into doubt. Dissatisfaction became an even greater burden, a cruel reminder that he wasn't living the life he wanted. This anguish grew day by day, until it became impossible to ignore. It was as if something inside him was about to explode, demanding to be heard. And it was in this state of profound dissatisfaction that life began to pave the way for an unexpected turn of events. Inside James's head, a constant voice insisted that he was incapable of change. "Self-employment isn't for people like you," the thought murmured, like an echo of old experiences. He believed that entrepreneurship was a privilege for the few, those born with money or influential connections. And so, he kept his dreams locked away. Many of these ideas stemmed from phrases he'd heard since childhood. "Work hard. Accept what you've got. That's just how life is." These beliefs had infiltrated his mind and, without realizing it, shaped his choices. James repeated these silent mantras, believing his destiny was already written, and there was little he could do. Whenever he thought about trying something new, fear quickly crept in. Fear of failure, fear of losing what little he already had, fear of being ridiculed. This feeling of inadequacy paralyzed him, as if invisible chains held him in place. And no matter how much he desired change, he ended up returning to the routine he knew. The curious thing is that, even with these beliefs, James never stopped dreaming. There was a small but stubborn flame that persisted within him. It was as if something deep inside whispered, "You can do more." But this whisper competed with the deafening noise of doubts and insecurity. And it was precisely in this conflict between belief and fear that James began to feel an even stronger calling. A nagging feeling so persistent that it would lead him to seek answers in unexpected ways. One night, after another hard day at work, James returned home completely exhausted. The traffic had been chaotic, the pile of tasks seemed endless, and deep down he felt like he was at his limit. As he tossed his briefcase into the corner of the living room and sank onto the couch, he realized he couldn't go on living like this. It was as if something inside him had finally screamed louder. At that moment, tears flowed uncontrollably. They weren't just tears of exhaustion, but of pent-up frustration. He wondered, is this all life has to offer me? The silent answer echoing in his heart was clear. For the first time, he admitted to himself that he deserved more, even if he didn't know how to achieve it. That moment of rupture was like a bolt of lightning, shining in the darkness. James realized he needed to break the cycle he was trapped in, or he would end up extinguishing his own dreams forever. The pain he felt wasn't just a problem, but a push to seek something different. It was a call to change, Even if he had no idea where to begin, he sat for long minutes, staring at the ceiling as he had so often done. Only this time, there wasn't just emptiness. There was a dawning certainty that life could be different. It was as if an invisible door were opening before him, begging for the courage to walk through. And it was in this state of vulnerability and silent decision that James began to open himself to new possibility. Little did he know that he was about to encounter something that would completely change the way he saw the world. It was one random afternoon, while aimlessly browsing the internet, that James came across a video that caught his attention. The title talked about transforming your life through the power of your mind, and it seemed unlike anything he'd ever seen. Curious, he pressed play without much expectation. But as he listened, something inside him began to awake. The narrator spoke about the law of attraction, about how thoughts shape reality. It was as if every word was directed directly at him, touching on things James had always felt but never been able to explain. For the first time, he glimpsed the possibility that his life wasn't doomed to monotony. He just had to learn to think and act differently. Intrigued, James delved into the topic. He searched for articles, books, and other videos, trying to better understand the idea. He discovered stories of ordinary people who had radically changed their trajectories by applying the law of attraction. The more he read, the more his heart filled with hope, as if he had found a long-lost key. Of course, doubts also arose. Would it really work, or was it just another empty promise, the kind that only deceives the weary? James wavered between belief and suspicion, but he couldn't ignore his curiosity. Something in him told him he had to at least try. And so, without knowing exactly what he was doing, James took the first steps toward a new journey. A journey that would begin with small practices, but would soon lead him to discoveries capable of completely transforming his worldview. With each new piece of content he consumed about the law of attraction, James felt a spark ignite within him. It was as if someone had finally shown him a way out of that labyrinth of frustrations. The idea that his thoughts could create his reality seemed daring, yet enchanting. He began to allow himself to believe, even if only in small doses. In the following days he began to walk more lightly, as if carrying a secret inside his chest. The routine at work remained tough, but suddenly it seemed less suffocating. After all, James now had a hidden purpose, a vision that his life could change. This simple perspective already altered his mood and his outlook on life. He began to dream differently. They were no longer distant daydreams, but vivid images that appeared in his mind, as if he could touch the future. He saw himself free from that gray desk, master of his own space, serving people with a sparkle in his eyes. These scenes replayed like little internal movies, giving him the courage to move forward. Even without knowing how to explain it, James felt he was approaching something big. It was as if the universe was showing him signs, small clues that he was on the right path. And every detail, a conversation, a random sentence read, seemed to reinforce this new belief. Hope grew and became fuel for his days. And it was in this state of enchantment and anticipation that James took it a step further. He decided not just to believe, but to practice. After all, if the law of attraction was real, it was time to put it to the test and see how far it could take him. James discovered that gratitude was one of the most powerful tools of the law of attraction. At first, it felt strange to be thankful for small things, like the morning sun, a hot cup of coffee, or even simply having a roof over his head. But little by little, he realized that this exercise changed the way he saw the world. What had previously gone unnoticed began to shine brightly. Every night before bed, James would take out a notebook and write down 3 things he was grateful for. At first, he struggled to find reasons, but he soon realized that life was full of them. This simple ritual helped him sleep more soundly, with a calmer mind and a warmer heart. It was as if he were planting seeds of happiness in the present. Throughout the day, he began practicing gratitude mentally. When he received his paycheck, instead of complaining about how little it was, he was grateful for the money coming in. When traffic was long, he was grateful for the car that took him. This new perspective transformed problems into opportunities to recognize abundance, even in small doses. Over time, James noticed subtle changes in his mood. He was more patient, more open. People around him noticed too, commenting that he seemed different, lighter. It was as if gratitude was a lens that beautified even the bleakest scenes in his life. And as he dove into this new habit, James began to realize that gratitude was just the beginning. There were even more intense practices that could bring him closer to his future vision, and he was ready to explore them. James realized that it wasn't enough to simply wish for a different life. He had to see it clearly. So every morning he closed his eyes and transported himself to the future he wanted to live. He visualized himself walking into his own office, with satisfied clients and a sense of pride pulsing in his chest. It was as if every detail already existed within his mind. He didn't just imagine it, he felt it. He mentally touched the furniture, smelled the room, and heard the conversations around him. The more real he made the scene in his mind, the more he believed it was possible. Visualization ceased to be a mere daydream and became a daily rehearsal for the future. These moments became the highlight of his day. While many were still caught up in the hustle and bustle, James had already projected himself into the tomorrow he desired, and this practice gave him a different energy, as if motivating him to approach his routine with a fresh perspective. What had once been a burden was now a stepping stone to get closer to what he wanted. Little by little, this clarity began to influence his decision. He found himself wondering, if I already owned my own business, how would I act now? This simple question changed his posture, his choices, and even the way he spoke. It was as if the James of the future was already guiding his steps in the present. And as he delved deeper and deeper into this exercise, James began to discover another powerful tool that could further enhance his inner transformation. James understood that his mind needed to be fed with new ideas, different from the old beliefs that held him back. It was then that he began practicing positive affirmations every day. He would say to himself phrases like, "I am capable, I deserve prosperity, my life is transforming." At first it sounded strange, almost forced, but he persisted. With each repetition, James felt like he was reprogramming his mind. It was like replacing a trail of negative thoughts with new routes full of possibilities. Little by little, those words stopped being mere sounds and began to become real feelings within him. He didn't just speak them, he believed them. Those affirmations became part of his morning routine. As he looked in the mirror, he stared into his own eyes and reinforced the message that he was worthy of everything he dreamed of. This simple practice brought him confidence and helped him start the day with renewed energy. It was like putting on invisible armor against self-doubt. At work, when moments of stress or insecurity arose, James would remember the phrases he repeated at home, and by bringing those words to mind, he felt stronger to face any challenge. It was as if he had discovered a secret source of courage, always available within him. And so, with his mind increasingly aligned with positive thoughts, James began to notice something curious happening around him. Small, almost imperceptible signs showed that reality was also adjusting to the new beliefs he had been cultivating. It wasn't long before James began noticing small shifts in his life. At first they were simple coincidences, like meeting people who spoke precisely about the topics he'd been studying. Then, subtle opportunities began to emerge, almost like unexpected gifts from the universe. He sensed something was moving. One day a colleague mentioned a free entrepreneurship course in town. Previously James would have ignored it, thinking it wasn't for him. But now, he saw these invitations as clear signs that he was on the right track. He decided to participate, and from there, ideas blossomed that reinforced his confidence in starting his own business. Even in the job he hated so much, different situations began to stand out. A boss who had never noticed him before began to praise him for small initiatives. A boring, routine task ended up giving him the chance to learn something new. James no longer saw these episodes as coincidences, but as direct reflections of his inner change. The curious thing is that even his Enon seemed to attract different people. Old friends sought him out again, and new connections began to emerge, bringing perspectives he would never have considered before. It was as if the world around him had changed colors, responding to the new radiance emerging within him. And as these signs became more frequent, James realized that his journey wouldn't just be one of triumphs. There would also be trials, moments when his faith in transformation would be severely tested. Despite all the positive signs, James discovered that his greatest enemy was not outside, but within. There were days when the old voice of limiting beliefs would scream again, trying to convince him that everything was just an illusion. These thoughts made him doubt, as if the universe were testing his resolve. Fear was also present. Fear of taking risks and losing what little he already had. Fear of being judged by family and friends. Fear of not living up to his dream. Sometimes this burden was so great that he almost gave up, returning to his old cycle of complaining. The difference now is that James knew these fears were just shadows. Furthermore, there was self-sabotage. At times he would create excuses for not taking action. I don't have time. It's not the right moment. I need to wait a little longer. These phrases became invisible traps, keeping him stuck in his comfort zone. Recognizing this was painful, but also necessary, and as if that weren't enough, external pressure mounted. People close to him, unable to understand his changes, told him he was dreaming too big. These opinions echoed in his mind, shaking his confidence. James found himself torn between trusting his own heart or giving in to the voices from outside. It was in this whirlwind of doubts that he began to realize, if he truly wanted to change his life, he would have to face not only the world, but above all himself. And soon life would give him concrete proof of this. It was one ordinary morning that James received the news that destabilized him. A promotion opportunity, which he believed would be his chance to breathe financially, ended up going to another colleague. He felt as if the ground had fallen out from under him. For a moment, all his efforts to change his mindset seemed futile. The impact was so strong that James seriously considered giving up. What's the point of believing, visualizing, and giving thanks if nothing actually happens? He muttered silently. This frustration rekindled his old doubts, and negative thoughts began to haunt him again, like ghosts from a past he longed to leave behind. That night, lying in bed, the gratitude notebook remained closed. He couldn't write anything. Pain spoke louder than hope. It was as if his faith was being tested, requiring him to choose between giving in to bitterness or trusting the invisible process he was following. It was then that a memory jolted him. He recalled a phrase he'd read in one of his books. The greatest tests come before the greatest transformations. This simple idea rekindled a flame within him. If the universe was testing his patience, perhaps it was because something greater was already underway. And it was with this renewed hope that James decided not to give up. He stood up, opened his gratitude notebook, and wrote, even with tears in his eyes, "Thank you, because something better is coming." Little did he know that this choice would mark the beginning of a new turning point in his life. The day after the setback, James woke up feeling different. Instead of wallowing in frustration, he took a deep breath and decided he would keep going. He wouldn't let this setback define his future. If I've given up so many times before and nothing has changed, now I'll keep going until the end, he thought to himself. This decision brought a new kind of strength, almost silent, but firm. He began to view challenges as part of the process, not as signs of failure. Each obstacle was seen as a lesson, a stepping stone that brought him closer to the future he desired. This shift in perspective led James to resume his practices with more discipline: visualizations, gratitude, affirmations, Now it was no longer just a routine, but a commitment to his future. Even when reality seemed to fall short of his expectations, James chose to believe. He reminded himself that transformation began within, and that the external world merely reflected his inner state. This conviction helped him avoid getting lost in the doubts that still occasionally crept in. Perseverance also began to shape his attitude toward others. Once shy and insecure, he now spoke with more confidence and exuded more energy. This change was noticeable at work, in conversations with friends, and even in casual encounters. James was becoming someone who inspired others, even without realizing it, and as this new version of himself grew stronger, the universe seemed to conspire even more in his favor. It was in this moment of renewed confidence that unexpected people began to cross his path, bringing ideas and opportunities that would give a new direction to his journey. It was during a casual conversation with a friend that James heard an idea that sparked his mind. The friend was talking about how small initiatives could grow into promising businesses. That simple thought fell into his heart like a seed ready to germinate. He returned home reflecting on how he could apply this to his own life. That same week in a bookstore, James found a book on entrepreneurship that seemed to have been placed there especially for him. The pages told stories of ordinary people who, with courage and vision, had transformed their lives. It was exactly the kind of inspiration he needed at that moment. Furthermore, new people began to appear in his path. He met a speaker at a free event in the city who shared practical tips on how to start a project from scratch. James listened attentively, feeling that those words answered the questions he'd been carrying inside for so long. Even mundane situations, like watching a documentary or reading a news article online, seemed charged with meaning. It was as if the universe spoke to him in different ways, offering clues for building the future he so desired. Every detail became fuel for his idea, and with this flood of inspiration, James began to shape what had previously been just a distant dream. Still shy but full of hope, he decided he was ready to take his first concrete step towards starting his own business. With all those ideas swirling in his mind, James finally summoned the courage. He decided to open a small business, something simple but one that represented his entry into the world he'd always dreamed of. He didn't have much capital, but he used his creativity to start with what he could afford. It was the first step outside his comfort zone, and that already filled him with pride. In the beginning, fear was still present. He wondered if he could attract clients, if the money would be enough to sustain the venture, or if it would all be nothing more than a failed attempt. But at the same time, there was a new strength within him, a confidence fueled by the practices of the law of attraction. This faith kept him moving forward, even amid doubts. James dedicated hours to learning, adjusting and improving every detail. He didn't see obstacles as barriers, but as lessons. If something went wrong, he was grateful for the experience and asked himself what he could do differently. This light-hearted, positive mindset made everything seem less burdensome, and the most curious thing is that, as soon as he took that first step, doors began to open. A referral here, an opportunity there, and soon the first clients arrived. It was as if the universe was responding to his movement, providing precisely the conditions he needed to continue growing. This beginning was still fragile, full of uncertainty, but it already held the promise of something much greater. And as he strengthened his small business, James discovered that a positive mindset not only sustained his journey, but also attracted special people who believed in him. Every day, James realized how his new way of thinking directly influenced his results. Instead of complaining about difficulties, he focused on solutions, making problems seem smaller. This different approach didn't go unnoticed. Clients felt confident talking to him, and partners saw in him someone willing to grow. His positive mindset also changed his energy. James smiled more, spoke enthusiastically, and exuded hope in every conversation. This vibe attracted people who identified with his journey, and many of them began to support him spontaneously. It was as if he had become a magnet for opportunities and positive connections. Even in difficult moments when something went wrong, James remained calm. Instead of despairing, he took a deep breath and told himself, "This is part of the process. Something better is on the way." This confidence not only calmed his heart, but also strengthened the faith of those around him. He realized that the business grew not only because of his hands-on effort, but also because of the energy he put into every detail. When he served a client, he did so with genuine gratitude, as if they were already an established success. This genuine care created a unique experience, and people returned, recommending his work to others. And it was like this, by cultivating positive thoughts and acting with faith, that James saw his small initiative gain momentum. What started out timidly soon began to expand, surprising even himself. What was once just a small business began to grow beyond James's wildest dreams. Clients not only returned, but also recommended his services to friends and family. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon he could no longer handle it all alone. It was a growth that seemed to flow naturally, as if guided. With more activity came the opportunity to invest in improved. James expanded his space, brought in new equipment, and began planning to hire people to help him. Each achievement was celebrated with gratitude, as a reminder that all that mental and emotional effort was paying off. He felt that prosperity was not just material, but also internal. Abundance began to be reflected in various areas of his life. He no longer had to worry about choosing between paying a bill or saving a little money. Now there was balance, security, and even the possibility of realizing dreams that had previously seemed distant. Short trips, gifts for family, leisure time, all were part of this new phase. What was most impressive was how James attracted unexpected partnerships. People who believed in his work appeared to contribute, bringing new ideas and even proposals for expansion. It was as if the universe was always one step ahead, preparing the next step in his journey. And faced with so much growth, James realized he was no longer the same man who arrived home tired from work, dreaming of change. Now he was experiencing this transformation. But the biggest turning point was yet to come. As the months passed, James looked back and could hardly believe how much he had changed. Once trapped in a job he hated, he now lived freely, master of his own time and choices. His life was no longer defined by bills and fatigue, but by projects that sparked enthusiasm and pride. His once heavy mornings became lighter. He woke eager to start the day, planning new steps to expand his business. Gone was the suffocating traffic and the clock dictating his hours. Now he was the one who wrote his own routine, with a better work-life balance. The sparkle in his eyes, which had previously seemed dull, was back. Friends and family noticed the difference. James was more confident, more smiling, radiating an energy that inspired others. It was as if he had reconnected with his essence, letting the best version of himself shine through. Beyond financial prosperity, there was an invisible wealth that grew alongside it, a sense of purpose. He not only made money, but also felt he was on the right path, building something that reflected who he truly was. This fulfillment fulfilled him in a way no steady paycheck ever could. And as he realized this new life, James realized the transformation wasn't over. It was just the beginning of a longer journey, where each step would open even more surprising doors. James's story wasn't just about starting a business or achieving prosperity. It was about rediscovering the strength that had always been within him. He proved to himself that he didn't have to accept a lackluster life, and that thoughts, when well directed, can open paths previously unseen. His journey was a silent invitation for others to believe in it too. James learned that true wealth begins in the mind. Change isn't born from money itself, but from the courage to imagine a different future and act as if it were already real. It was this alignment between faith and action that transformed his circumstances. And this is a truth anyone can apply at any point in life. He also discovered that gratitude and perseverance are like magic keys. These habits sustained his journey, even on the most difficult day. And looking back, he realized that each challenge had been an essential step toward growth and strength. Nothing had happened by chance. Today, James's story proves that the law of attraction isn't just a distant theory. It's a living tool, capable of transforming destinies, as long as it's used with intention and consistency. His life is a reflection of this power, and his success is just the beginning. And as he shares his journey, James leaves a question open for those who hear his story. If he was able to change everything by believing in himself and the power of the mind, what can happen when you decide to do the same? And so, James Williams's life was transformed. From a weary, hopeless man, he became free, prosperous, and purposeful. But the great lesson his journey leaves us with is simple. Change begins within the mind. When you choose to believe, be grateful, and visualize, the universe finds surprising ways to respond. James discovered that the law of attraction isn't instant magic, but a process of trust, action, and perseverance. Every step, every challenge, and every victory was shaped by his new mindset. And this proves that true prosperity isn't just about money, but about the freedom to live in alignment with your dreams. Now, here's a thought for you. What would happen if you started changing your thoughts today and cultivating gratitude for what you already have? Perhaps the answer is closer than you think, just waiting for you to take the first step. If James's story inspired you, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This way you'll continue receiving stories and content that can illuminate your journey. Also, leave a like and share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. Because, in the end, the prosperity you seek may be just a thought away.